Well, thanks for joining us today. We have Becky Barnes, who is a board member for the Palmetto Achievement Center for Excellence. It's the first dyslexia charter school in the Midlands. They call it PACE for short. She also is an advocate and an educational consultant who does training for teachers, parents, and other people who need to understand the 504 and the IEP process. She's joining us today. We are NAMI with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We're the largest grassroots organization in America dedicated to educating, advocating, and doing presentations on mental health and how to stay mentally healthy, what to do if things go wrong, and how to find resources when you need them. So thanks for joining us today, Becky. We appreciate you coming on and taking time to do this. So we wanted to talk about a team approach for IEPs and 504s because we have a lot of parents who come to us and they do our basics class and they get a little stuck on that IEP and the 504 process. They don't really understand the difference between the two. They don't understand how to get it started. And a lot of questions come up about that. So we thought this is the best way to address it. So if we get the first question to get started on this is, how early could somebody start the process for an IEP or a 504?
I would say is if you go to the Department of Education's website for the South Carolina Department of Education, or if you go to the U.S. Department of Education, either one, you're going to find under Part C that early intervention services can help children from birth to 36 months. And in South Carolina, that specifically is BabyNet.
Okay.
So BabyNet. And a lot of times when we're born, we have kids that are born or they come in and we take them to the pediatrician, they'll refer them to BabyNet.
Okay.
Right? And BabyNet gets them from 0 to 36 weeks. And then when a child turns 3, that is when children with developmental disabilities can go to the public schools and the public schools take over. And that's from age 3 till age 21. Now, in South Carolina, we're a little bit different because we've got all different laws, but whether or not you have a disability in the state of South Carolina, you can go till age 21 to high school until you return, either age out or you get a diploma.
Okay.
This is stated very clearly on the South Carolina Department of Education's website. But you can get different services in the state through the schools if you have been identified with a qualifying disability that requires special instruction or special services up until age 21 through the schools. And in South Carolina, we also have a couple of other things going on. We have the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs that has a whole department for children that have autism, that have intellectual disabilities, traumatic brain injuries, and other related services. That adds another layer on for us. We also in South Carolina have something called TEFRA Medicaid, and NAMI covers this also. And this is for children that would have services. And then we have a third layer for children that have severe issues called continuum of care. And if you have a child that has a mental health crisis that requires intensive services, South Carolina outside the school has continuum of care, and continuum of care and DDSN have all these case managers and all these things that are available to you inside the school and outside the school. The way to start is to contact the school because the school can tell you what's available, or an organization like NAMI, or if you have, for instance, your child has autism and my 18-year-old has autism, the South Carolina Autism Society, ABLE of South Carolina, the ARC of South Carolina. Those are all organizations that are out there to help parents and families that have these children that need help. Okay. There's also Family Connections and Healthy Connections. They help you figure out how the stuff, what can I apply for? How do I apply for it? What if I don't speak English and I don't know how to do this? What if I am illiterate? And we're in a state where the literacy rate in the state of South Carolina for adults is about 40%. So it's not unusual for someone who needs this to have to ask for help. And in the state of South Carolina, compared to other states, which I know you've lived in other places in the world and states, and I lived in North Carolina, we have a lot out there. We just have to know how to access it. So going to the school and saying, this is my kid's disability. What do I need to do? How can we assess for it? And what services can I get is a good first step, because in most districts, there's going to be someone that will be able to sit down and say, these are the organizations that can help you outside the school, and this is what we can do inside the school.
Okay, so we can start the process at basically any time from when the pediatrician recognizes there a problem. We can start the process as young as 0 to 36 months, and then that carries them all the way through to 21 if that's necessary through the school district. And then we connect with those organizations like ABLE South Carolina, or we connect with the Department of Disability or the Continuum of Care people. And I can get all those on our website, and on this, I can link all those.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I found is it's not that there's not organizations out there, it's knowing what they are.
Okay.
Because it's really hard. Knowing how to get a hold of the people and knowing what to say when you get them, and being able to describe it, because it's not just here, it's in everything in life. And from government services and from the state, you have to jump through the hoops. You have to meet the bit marks. You have to go through the checklist, and we have to do it in a specific order, a specific time. It's not that we don't believe that or anything like that. It's the way it is. And it's put there in order to fail safe, to make sure that we're doing everything we should correctly, to prevent, not everyone always thinks of abuse, but it also to prevent someone from falling through the crack, and to help everyone in a way that is systematic and equal.
Right, to follow to level that playing field out. I got you.
If we're following a checklist of things and we do it this way every time, and you do it consistently, it's going to be really hard to claim, well, Johnny over there got all this stuff, and Susie has all these needs and she's not getting met, and it's because X, Y, Z didn't feel like giving it to him. No, that's the reason we have these laws. That's the reason the school implements it. That's the reason government implements it. That's the reason we have Medicaid checklists that we have to go through, so that we make sure that we've done everything we can to get all the information, and we're all in the equal playing field, and we are individualizing to the needs of the child. So part of this is trying to weed out and not go through so much and do a checklist and saying, hey, we got all the information. Now we know what slot to put you in and where to go from here. And that's what we have to figure out with even IEPs and 504s. The process, even though it's frustrating at times and it's long, it's about making sure that we have everything correctly, so that we're doing exactly what's needed, and we're not treating someone for cancer that has diabetes.
I gotcha. So is that the legal responsibilities of each party in the process? It's like each party has a legal responsibility to bring their piece to the table. And
I mean, and I'm not an attorney, so I can't get legal, yes, but I mean, that's the deal, is there's certain laws, and there's laws that as a parent, I'm required to do certain things. You know, I'm required to feed my children up until they're age 18. And there's more nuances. I'm going to just say age 18, because you could have a whole entire thing on if your child has a disability, what happens after age 18.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's covered kind of in the NAMI classes of what happens after 17 for children with severe disabilities. I'm legally responsible for clothing my child, feeding my child, providing medical care for them, shelter, taking them to school. That's what I'm required to do as a parent.
Right.
Now, does that mean that I might not have some other responsibilities, morally and ethically? Yeah. But legally, things are really spelled out in the law, who's responsible for what, especially when it becomes the child with disabilities. It's pretty, according to, I mean, the attorney that I work with, the school attorney that advises PACE, the attorney that I've had with my children helping with my situations, they're like, it's really cut and dry. These are the things you're responsible for. This is what medical is responsible for. This is what mental health is responsible for. This is what school's responsible for.
So we all have our...
Yeah, and I think that that's a good thing. If we all know what our roles are and who's responsible for what, it makes it easier for us when we're needing help to know who to go to and who should be getting this for us, giving the information to someone else.
And so those departments that we just talked about, the continuum of care, the Department of Disability, the Rights Law website, the Department of Education, both the federal and the South Carolina, we can find the responsibilities for, and Family Connections, of course. Family Connections helps to fill out some of that paperwork and to make sure that those things are being.
And absolutely. So Family Connections is the parent training institute that's funded by the government in the state of South Carolina, and they have that information. But the federal Department of Education site has the entire Individuals with Disabilities Act law on it. If you go to the Office of Civil Rights, they have guidance actually, and frequently asked questions about what are your rights under Section 504.
Okay.
What can you do? The Individuals with Disabilities Act, they actually have explanations and webinars a lot of times on those. Pete Wright actually does entire conferences that you can go to, and he has those on his website. Another one that has some information is COPA, Council of Parent Advocates and Attorneys. And they have a lot of information about, who's responsible for what. So it's out there. Understood.org is another one that's really good. So yeah, I would say that it's out there, and there's lots of people that are willing to help. And I gotta say that I can't speak for every Department of Education, but in South Carolina, if you have a question and you don't know who's responsible or who you should talk to, you can call the Department of Education, the South Carolina Department of Education, and you can talk under the Ombudsman for Special Services, is Dr. Lynette Cox, and she will tell you who's responsible and who you need to talk to, and help you oftentimes go through and get a hold of the people, or tell you who you should contact at a different department, or at a different, at the Health and Human Services, or for Medicaid. Yeah, they're very helpful. They want parents to succeed. And if you have a question about what could happen, or what is the legal guidance of the law, Department of Education, Barbara Drayden, the lead counsel for the South Carolina Department of Education, and Dr. Cox have been more than willing to meet with parents and help them. And they often will do, Barbara Drayden has repeatedly before, COVID, done seminars and trainings. So
Fantastic.
It's out there, and there's lots of help out there. I think it just becomes confusing after a while because there's so much information.
So when we go back to the confusing part, so what's the difference between, how do I know what I'm asking for? Do I go to the school and say I need an IEP? Do I go and say I need a 504? How do I even know what I need?
So the first thing you need to ask yourself is, does your child have a disability? Has a doctor or someone, do you suspect your child has a disability, and why? And that's really big, because it's not like, oh, I think my kid needs more help, and it would be better off if he, got some extra tutoring. That's not it. Or my kid needs double time to finish a test. The definition is clearly stated on the site. It's about a disability. So Barbara Drayden and Pete Wright both like to say, if you haven't put it in writing, it didn't happen. So the first thing, if I suspected my children had a disability, I would tell my teacher, I think my kid has a disability. What do I do from here? Who should I contact? And then I would ask for their email and write them and say, hey, I suspect my child might have an issue. You don't have to say, I think my kid qualifies. What I would do is I wouldn't even do that. I would just say, who do I contact about the possibility that my kid has a disability? And, there's a law that you can look up in Google, and it's called Child Find. And Pete Wright has an entire section on his website about Child Find. And it's basically where, according to the website and what has been explained to me and what we were trained on, as in schools are trained on, and the director of PACE has explained, it's basically that if you get paid $1 from the government, you make an agreement, right? We all know that.
Right.
If you get government money, it has strings. And so schools are required, traditional school districts are required to locate, identify, and evaluate children with disabilities, whether they're enrolled in their school or not.
Okay.
And so it's suspected. So what you would do to get the ball rolling is put in writing and ask the teacher, ask the principal, who is in charge of identifying children in your district under the child find laws that I've heard about.
Need to know at that point whether we're looking for a 504 or an IEP. That's just really getting the process started. We send an email, we think we have a disability, or we know we have a diagnosable disability. How do we get the process started? And that's done in writing. And so once we move forward from that, tell me what testing gets done and who does the testing. Do I have to bring that? Does the school do that? How do we get the test? And just while we're answering that question, if my child is homeschooled, do I still approach the school and will they do the same evaluation that a child who's in the public school would get? Answer that for me, please.
So you got like 3 really big questions.
Right.
Okay. So the process starts, you contact someone in the school and say, I suspect my kid has a disability. And I would put in writing and say, I suspect my child has a disability. Who would I need to contact about that and getting the ball rolling? And then they're going to send an email back saying, you're located in this school district, or you're located in where do you go to school? Basically, they're going to ask. And then you're going to say, I'm in a private school, I'm in the high school, Clover High School, Clover Middle, Oak Ridge Middle, or I'm homeschooled. And the reason you're going to say that is because a lot of times the schools have team members assigned. And under the law, it's the specific way of doing it for, depending on if they think it might be a 504 issue, where it's just accommodations needed and services. We'll talk about that. Or if you need specialized instruction, which would require an individualized education plan.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yes. So the difference is 504 is just accommodations, such as I need something to fidget with at the desk. I need extra time for a test taken. But an individualized education plan, the IEP, is something very specific to the instruction of the child, the actual academic.
And so if you actually look at the process guide from the state of South Carolina, it specifically says that when a child has a disability that is so unique that it requires specialized instruction, and that's not me saying it, that's a direct quote from what the process guide that's on the South Carolina Department of Education website says, then that requires something different. If you have to have one-to-one, if you have to change the standards, if you need a different form of teaching that's taking place in the school, if you are going to have goals, data collection, and you've got deficits or that affects your ability to function socially, emotionally, developmentally, and academically, then you would require someone with a special background to instruct you and teach you the way that we expect people of your age and be able to take a standardized test and like a level that we of expectation. It's the difference between if I go and I sprain my ankle and they give me a wrap and crutches for 5 days. That's an accommodation.
Okay.
Right? That's an accommodation. If I have to have surgery and PT, that's specialized instruction.
And so we don't really need to know that until we've gone through that testing process. So they're going to go through a process of, and so what are they going to test for in these situations? Are they going to do, tell me what the testing would look like and what my responsibility as a parent is to bring to the table and what the school will do the testing of. What are they going to look for?
It's going to vary. So it depends. Because if I have diabetes, for instance, and I say my child's a diabetic, that might qualify. Well, that's a disabling disability. And Section 504, if you look it up, it's any disability that affects a life function. And you're going to find this on the government website. I mean, it's very much there when it talks about Section 504, and it's the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and it's a national law that protects qualified individuals from discrimination based on their disability. So this is a civil rights law.
Okay.
And it applies to government housing. It applies not just to schools. Everyone just thinks it's schools,
right,
but it applies to everything. But so if I have diabetes, I'm going to need an accommodation because I may have to have a health plan. I may have to have stuff in place if I get sick. There's no reason for me to have full-blown psychoeducational testing by a psychologist or a neuropsychologist or brain scans or all this other stuff, right? That's hey, we need to meet with the nurse. We need to put a plan in place, what they call a health plan in place. And then we need to develop a accommodation plan under Section 504 so that anyone that's interacting with you knows that it's related to your disability.
Yes.
This is the plan. This is what we have to do to address that.
Okay.
That could be enough. But even then, what they're going to do is they're going to call a meeting. So they're going to say, tell us about your disability. Tell us if you've had someone treat your disability. Do you have some outside recognition and diagnosis of the disability? Why do you suspect it? And realistically, you need to say, I suspect it. We've had my kid treated for 4 years. My child has asthma. My child was a preemie. My child has dysregulated mood disorder because of it, and was diagnosed by a psychiatrist. Those are all things that you bring to the table and give them. And then they're going to call a meeting. What the meeting's going to look like depends on what it is. And under Section 504, they may say, we've got enough information. They're going to review the information you got. What other information do we need to decide what to do in the school to accommodate the child's mental, physical, and academic needs? Well, if I'm a straight A student and I have diabetes or asthma, I don't need maybe anything academically. I just need access to my inhaler, or I need access to medical equipment. That's not something, I don't need a bunch of academic testing. If they have a need that affects academics, then you look at it and say, how is it affecting their social, emotional, academics? And that's one thing I'll throw out there. So realistically, we've always thought of school as academics. And I can tell you at the school that I'm on the board for, we start with academics. We start with the science of reading, but we also are addressing social emotional. And what we need to understand is school is academic and non-academic. Part of the way that we teach our children to be appropriate, active members of society that pay bills, get jobs, vote, is we teach them how to behave, how to act, so social expectations. Well, how do you do that? Whether you're homeschool, private school, or public school, you do it through education. You take them places, you interact with others, you teach them. Realistically, schools have a lot on their plate. They screen kids for hearing and eyesight. They are the first stop when it comes to needs if the family's in crisis for, if they can't eat food, if they have medical needs, if they're homeless, there's laws around that. So whether we like it or not, we have created a system where the school system is the first ones, they're the first line of defense for abuse, for homelessness, for medical needs. The schools are the ones that see the kids, and they've got these expectations in order to prevent intervention. So what we've got is, if there's a deficit socially, emotionally, physically, or academically, we should notify the school. The school then goes through and says, how are we going to determine that? And then we get a team together and say, do we need to do a full battery of standardized assessments, including an IQ test, academics? Do we need to do, what kind of testing do we need? Has the parent gotten that testing done? And how do we proceed from here? That's number one. And in that meeting, they're going to decide, do we just, as a health plan, do we have enough information to make a health plan? Do we have enough information to give accommodations? Do we have enough to do follow through under IDEA with an education plan? or do we need more? And then they're going to decide what that more means. Now, under Section 504 in a health plan, it's a lot looser. It's you got to do what the kid needs to access the education environment. IEPs are different because it's an individualized education plan, requires special intervention by a specialist, right? When it comes to surgery. And then the school goes, okay, what level of care, what level do we need? And if you have something that is academic, socially, or emotionally significant, they're going to test and do what they call psychoeducational eligibility meeting. And they're going to bring in a school psychologist, which is a specific type of psychologist that's been trained to do testing, academic testing, social emotional testing, and developmental testing, and interpret those results. They're going to bring an administrator in. They're going to bring a general ed teacher that is certified, because they have to pass the praxis and they have to do 120 hours of continual education training, not just on academics, but on child development and appropriateness and standards, classroom management. They get all this training. They're going to bring in probably a guidance counselor that has some training that's like a blend of an educator and a therapist. A lot of the schools now have therapists on staff, RBH and therapists and counselors and social workers. They may bring them in. And if your child has the suspected issues, if my child can't speak and they can't talk correctly, and they find out my kid can't say ours and my kid's 10, they're going to bring a speech pathologist in. They're going to bring someone in that they think might have new information or might contribute to figuring out what the significance of the child's suspected disability or diagnosed disability by an outside source is, and how that affects them, and what we as a team can do. And the parents are a very important part of the team. The parents, in case after case, the Department of Education will tell you, the schools at PACE, the parents are the core of the team. The parent, you are your child's first person. You are the expert in your child. You have had them from day one.
Right.
And these people that are getting to know, some of the people are going to be brought in for the first time. They're going to look over, and data is great. You can't do anything without having evidence that you need to move forward, right? It's just like I said, you don't go and do ear surgery, or you don't go and remove your appendix without evidence that it's about to burst. It doesn't matter if you're in private school, public school, or homeschooled. You're going to send us information, and they're going to evaluate the standard of need under the law. Does your child need a 504 or an IEP? And I think that's one of the things that's hardest for people to understand. And according to most handbooks, and according to the Office of Civil Rights, according to the people I've talked with, the attorneys I've talked with that are represent the schools, and parents that I work with, it's free to the parent, free for the child at no cost to the parent, if you suspect a disability, to see what the disability is, identify, not diagnose, identify the disability, and then label that disability and decide what that child needs in order to become a successful adult that can live as independently as possible, work, continue education, pay taxes, and vote.
So we talked about a child with diabetes probably needing a 504 with accommodations for the health piece. So what if a child has something like dyslexia, or if they have bipolar disorder or something like that, that is impacting their academics as well? That's when we're going to be tested and evaluated for an IEP.
Yeah, so it's Department of Special Education. They'll call it Student Services. It's different ones.
Coming in.
So it's going to be people coming in.
It's going to be different people, but if they connect with the Department of Special Education, if they're not in the school district, but if they're in the school district, then just connect with the teacher to get started on that process.
Yes.
Do that by email.
Yeah, so I would ask the teacher, who do I contact about getting my TED tested, because I suspect my kid may have this issue. Okay. And a lot of times schools will say, okay, yeah, let's do a screener or something like that. And they have that right to do that. Okay, so they have the right to say, you think of your kid has dyslexia, we want to do a screener. Do you mind?
And is that like that's just a small battery of testing, or that's like
it's not even that. It's not even a test. It may be saying, hey, let's go over here and have a speech pathologist meet with you
gotcha.
and see that you hear. Let's see when I give you certain letters what you say the sound is. And,
so that they
and
can...
I choose dyslexia because actually in South Carolina I helped get a law passed that said that we're supposed to be screening children for dyslexia between kindergarten and third grade. And just because you have dyslexia doesn't mean you're automatically going to get an IEP.
Oh,
you
okay.
can go through a response to intervention, which is it's actually in the law. It's called response to intervention, or they also call it MTSS or student teams. It's got different names, but basically general ed is tier 1. It's general education. And then you could say, hey, your kid's not reading on grade level. We want to go and pull them out in a group and do some extra instruction with them. And they have a way, and it's actually, there's guidance from the South Carolina Department of Education. There's guidance from the government. There's actually in the federal commentary under IDEA, and you can find a really great article on MTSS and RTI on rightslaw.com that was written by Susan Bruce that explains what it is and what it is not. They cannot use RTI to deny testing or delay testing.
I got you.
Response to intervention is a great way for a teacher that's certified to work with that student for 60 or 90 days to get data to say, hey, we've done what we normally do. Because if I'm in a room with 25 kids, and I will say right now during COVID, we've got situations where kids and teachers are being quarantined. So it would be realistic to say, let's give us some time and see if I work with this child one-on-one for 30 minutes a day, or with a small group of 3 kids instead of 25, if that makes a difference, maybe it's just too distracting. And then, well, let's work one-on-one and let's start an evaluation. And that's not unrealistic, because I can see, I mean, I may have a bad day on the test. I mean, I can have a bad day on the test and have an ear infection or COVID, and I have to take my final because I'm in college right now, and have to take my final or sit for a national certification because I'm getting ready to sit for a national certification as a family peer partner. And that day is set. There's no, oops, let me redo it. It's set. I have to take it that day or not take it.
Yes.
And if I have a cold or an ear infection or COVID, probably not going to do so well.
Yeah. And so we're going to be evaluating over the course of 90 days or 60 to 90 days, just to kind of see if we bring that child closer to expectation, or if we need more intervention for that child ongoing and going forwards. So what do we need to do if we recognize that our child has a disability? We've gone through the process, we've talked to their teacher, we've been referred for testing, we've done the testing. Now we're coming together for a meeting to decide where we go. Do we go with a 504? Do we go with an IEP? And if we go with an IEP, you know, what are the goals and expectations of that? So what do I need to do as a parent to prepare for that IEP meeting? Do I just show up? Do I need to bring records? Do I need to have already reviewed the records? What do I do? And how soon does that have to happen from when the testing gets done?
So you're going to go into the meeting, you're going to decide what type of testing you need to do. If you decide you're going to do a full psychological educational evaluation, there is paperwork that has to be filled out saying we're going to do a comprehensive psychoeducational evaluation, and we're going to test the following. And they're going to list out these. We're going to do speech, PT, physical therapy, occupational therapy. We're going to do a functional behavior assessment. We're going to assess whether or not your kid is developmentally appropriate. You know, can he feed himself? Can he bathe himself? Can your child read and write, and what level? We're going to do all these tests, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's great. But you have, in the state of South Carolina, 60 days from the day you sign that.
Okay.
Over. Now, if you're in North Carolina, it's a little bit different. They have 90 days from the day you notified them and gave permission.
Okay, so the day that I send the email, or the day that I say, yes, you can test? Yeah,
the day. And I always, when I send the email saying I wanted my kids, I would be like, hey, I want to evaluate my kid for XYZ. Consider this permission to start testing. So that we're not delaying out. But
Yes,
that being said, you have 60 days and they're going to go through and they're going to do the testing. Now then, you can show up at the IEP and do it all there. I don't think that's a good idea, because what I think is, as a parent, you are your child's number one advocate. You need to know it is going to be really hard for a person to go in and participate appropriately in the meeting and make decisions when you're hearing things for the first time. And education lingo, we have our own lingo. It's like a foreign language. We have like acronyms for days.
Yes.
We have terms for days. We have terms like appropriate. Well, what appropriate means in education may not mean the same thing as it means outside. When I say you have a deficit in phonological awareness, what does that mean? Do you know what? And there's all these things that are out there, and it's not because psychologists aren't good. There are some great psychologists that do really detailed tests, but sometimes the best neuropsychologists in the world, it's really hard to explain to someone a complex diagnosis. And some of the terms that we're using are outdated. Some of the terms that we as everyday people use are not in the diagnostic manual of identification that psychologists and psychiatrists use.
Okay.
And some of the terms that are used and identified under the 13 areas of disabilities in IDEA, to be quite frank, have very, they're loaded terms that cause extreme reactions.
They may use a term that sounds very derogatory or very old-fashioned, and then we say, wait, what are you saying about my kid?
And then we're also scared as parents because we don't want our kids labeled. Gotcha. And it's not because people are like, do you want to put this label on your kid? And there's reasons for that. If you have an autism diagnosis, and autism is a spectrum that's broadened, the more we have access to MRIs and CAT scans, which are amazing, y'all. They're amazing in EEGs. We can map a person's brain and compare them to other people's brains with similar diagnoses. And you can see with reading specifically, we have scientists that have mapped illiterate people as they learn, and we can see what is required. And if your brain doesn't light up a certain way, you're not reading. Reading, everyone that reads has 4 parts of their brain going at the same time. It's really fascinating. It's really cool. ADHD, because I have ADHD, and my kids have ADHD. ADHD is a very specific function of the brain that can be seen on EEGs and on CAT scans and MRIs. Okay. They actually can see how your brain is processing compared to what is considered a normal brain. So it's not like you have to do that all the time, but it's a different world than it was 10 years ago. As we've grown technology-wise, so have the types of tests that can be done to assess the impact and the way the person is wired and how it affects them. So that being said, there is under IDEA a category called autism. There's a category called specific learning disability, and there's 13 categories. There's a category called other health impaired, and I like to call other health impaired the dumping ground, because you can't list all the disabilities someone could have. I mean, though, as we do more and more stuff, we're learning stuff. For all I know, I could have every day there's a new disability, with genetics. It's a fascinating world. So there are different diagnoses coming out and being developed every day. You can't have 5,000 disabilities. Right. So you can't have that. Clump them, right? Speech language, autism, other health impaired, which is the dumping ground, specific learning disabilities. And if you look under specific learning disabilities, it's math, reading and writing, listening comprehension, and they list out some examples. Intellectual disability, developmental delay, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment. And that could be, if I have an orthopedic impairment, in school we learn to read, write, and do math, right? One of the requirements in the state of South Carolina is we have to do PE. If I can't run or jump, going to be kind of hard
to do that class. Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's for the reason. So what I recommend is that the parents ask for everything they're going to be discussing 72 hours before the meeting. And if you have never had a psychological evaluation, you need to meet with this psychologist that's done this testing and plan a 2-hour block and meet with them or someone that can explain the psychologist's testing and what it means.
So understand the report before you go to the IEP meeting.
Yeah.
And they're all called IEP meetings, right? They're not called 504 meetings. They're generally referred to as an IEP meeting, even if you come out of that with a 504.
They're called meetings for 504s and accommodations.
Okay.
In the state of South Carolina, schools use the Enrich program for both 504s and IEPs.
Okay.
And some of the lingo you really do need help understanding. For instance, after the meeting, you're going to get a meeting notice saying, this is what we discussed, this is what we decided, and this is when we're going to implement it, and this is what we want, all the other stuff. And we call it a prior written notice. But you're given the prior written notice documenting what went in the meeting after the meeting. So prior means before, but we're given this information after we've had the meeting. And the reason it's called prior written notice is prior to implementing the plan we just discussed.
I gotcha.
You're going to have this because you have something called procedural safeguards in every school, in every district. And one of the things that the parents need to do when they go into those first meetings to the eligibility meetings is they need to say, can I have a copy of the procedural safeguards to look over?
Okay.
If those parents can't read, are blind, speak Spanish, Italian, whatever, they need to say, I need this in my own language. I need it done in Braille. I need it audio. And if they don't understand it, they have the right, and most school officials will meet with them and say, I don't understand my rights. Can you explain them to me?
And they will do that for them.
Yes. I have yet to see someone that has said, no, I'm not going to explain that rights. Don't you know how to read?
Yeah, that makes sense.
No one ever says that. The problem is I think as parents, we're really embarrassed to say, I have no clue what this means.
Well, because I think
I need safeguards.
Yeah, and I think that brings us to the next point is, we get this information, we have all this information, and then we have these things that we're understanding are causing our child to struggle. But of course, we all want to give a positive spin on our kids, and we always want to be able to, support and, cheerlead for our kids. But how do we take out the emotions? How do we stop? I know parents that have, got angry in IEP meetings, or they've started crying in IEP meetings, and we get really, kind of choked up. It's kind of difficult, trying to work through this process. Sometimes it can get very emotional. How do you stay calm and use your listening skills and get through these meetings without kind of falling apart? What's your best advice on that?
Alcohol? No. Here's the thing. It is really hard. It is hard when you have your kid and you have all these hopes and dreams, and you wake up one day and you find out your kid's not going to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. That's hard.
Yeah.
And it's been there, and you realize your kid is brilliant and he's gifted, but he just hit 4th grade and he can't read. Mm-hmm. Can't read. Or you have this child that just doesn't understand social issues and says, I just want to kill myself. I hate school so bad, I'll die. I'd rather die. And literally you're ending up in the ER because they want to kill themselves over school. It's hard.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
I'm not going to lie to you. It's hard. And it's unrealistic for us to, we want to buckle up and be like, oh, you're going to fix this. Well, first of all, I come from a different place. Everyone is special in their own way, and they're not a broken item to be fixed. We need to help them to be successful, but fixing Van Gogh had bipolar disorder. It's well known. A lot of, as you actually look around, a lot of artists that in the history that we really look up to and that we love, a lot of the people that we like think are awesome, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, they're all neurodivergent. The people that we think are created all this great artwork and all these literature and music, I had to say, I believe in radical acceptance and helping them be the best person they could be instead of trying to fix them. And I think that's really hard as a parent. And I got to say,
Yeah.
as a parent, what I would tell you is to join NAMI. The NAMI has support groups. Find a group of parents. In the York County, Lancaster area, there's a Facebook group called the Fort Mill Special Needs United. You need a support group. You need your tribe. You need a therapist, and you need someone. You need to cry. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be disappointed. Cry, get it out at home. And then when you go into the meeting, be prepared to do business and do what you need for your kid, and advocate for your child like you would do if he was at the doctor's office. We would be there to be like, oh, just go home and take 2 Tylenol. We'd be like, yeah, he's got this huge gash and I think we might need stitches. I need you to look at it.
Right.
That's all you're doing. And it's not, I mean, it's tough because we're talking about our kids, and no one wants to say bad things about the kids.
Right.
And it's hard because sometimes when our kids come up with this, we have to deal with our own guilt, because especially if it's a mental health issue or it's something that makes them very different, it can be really hard because you're like, I did that to my kid.
Yeah. Which of course
what did I do?
Yeah. Which we know, of course, you did not. We know
right.
that, that's, so when we get to that table and we are feeling very emotional and is it okay to excuse ourselves for a minute? Is it okay to just kind of, say, I just need 5 minutes to collect my thoughts? Is it okay to kind of do that? Or, I mean, how would you, that would be a good strategy. And okay.
Yes.
And so your recommendations is having the information ahead of time and having it explained to you ahead of time, so you don't have that surprise kind of stuff in the meeting. We know that generally the educators and the administrators are going to start with the positives. So that's always helpful. We know that they're going to let us know what our kids are doing really well. But then when it comes to the negative piece, if we've already kind of got that ahead of time, if we already know what we're talking about, we should approach it more as a business meeting. And then if we do find ourselves getting overly emotional, we can just ask for 5 minutes to go and calm down and take 5 minutes to ourselves, and then come back to the table and perhaps move on from there. Because the goal is, right, to work as a team. That's what we're trying to do.
And I gotta say, so part of the reason you bring advocates to the table, and everyone always thinks an advocate is all about, oh, they're going to do something. Part of the reason you bring an advocate to the table is because it can be emotional. It's hard.
Yes.
And sometimes it's really hard. And we don't always agree on everything, but the goal should be the focus on the kid and getting what they need. But I had to say, when I go in with my kids and I meet with people, and I've got lots of friends that are advocates or therapists or something, they take someone with them.
Gotcha.
And that's going to sound crazy, but an advocate's goal sometimes is to be there to help move things along when the parent gets upset, or to say to the parent, stop it. You stop. Let's go out, take a break. Let's come back, because it gets emotional.
It does.
It's hard. It's hard when you're told, when you sit there and you hear that your kid is 3 years behind in every subject and he's going into 8th grade. When you get told your kid's going into 8th grade and can't do 5th grade math, and in the state of South Carolina, we don't have an alternate diploma, and if he can't pass Algebra 1, then he doesn't get a diploma in the state. You know what? That's really hard.
It's very hard. So that I think that we probably need another webinar for that section, because one of the things that I'm really interested in, I think we can finish one of the questions now, but then I think I would like to talk to you another time and just answer some more of the questions that we know we have. Just very quickly before I finish up, but just very quickly, tell me, if I have a child who is now in 10th grade and we haven't gotten the kid an IEP or a 504 and they have needed one, but we haven't really understood the process and we haven't really, figured out that that was available to us, or we've moved into a new district, or something's changed, is it worth even getting a kid who's in like 10th or 11th grade an IEP or a 504, or is it too late at that point?
No, it's never too late. So IEPs don't follow you past high school, but in college, and if you have a government job, 504s do.
Okay.
It is always good to do that. And if we know that you've got this deficit and all of a sudden you're like, wait, and sometimes it could be, you know what, I was able to function on accommodations, or I was doing fine and I've hit a wall. And that, if we think about it, I may work out every day, but I'm not an NFL player. And then all of a sudden I start doing stuff, and for some reason I'm running and I'm doing this extra, and then all of a sudden I can't do it anymore. I can't. I was growing and I was keeping up and now I hit a wall and I crashed. I can't run, I can't walk, I can't do anything.
Right.
And that means that there's a problem. And only in education are we like, oh, well, it's too late. If we did that and I woke up one day and I couldn't walk, we'd go to the doctor and we'd be like, find the problem so we can fix it. Same thing with education.
Okay.
The schools should do that. But more importantly, and I will say, so I was never identified as a child with any disability. I'm considered gifted. And I went to college and I went through this, and my children went through and were tested. My youngest was tested by a neuropsychologist. That's my preference. And the neuropsychologist was going through, and I had a pretty good idea based on other people that could not give a label what was going on. And that neuropsychologist said, your child has dyslexia because of this, this, and this. And I was like, what do you mean? He writes fine. And she's like, no, but he has problems with pronouncing things. He can't decode all the time words, and his spelling. She's going through it. I go, what? And my husband goes, ha, that's what you do.
So you then realize that you both have that same.
And I was like, I don't have dyslexia. So I was tested by Chad Kraska because I'm going back to school, and I know I have ADHD. That's like anyone who talks to me,
right.
You watch this thing, you're like, she's moving around a lot. So I knew I wanted to go back to school, and I know that I'm having to take a test because I'm trying to become a family peer partner. And I knew that I had to do that. Well, if you take national tests like the ACT, SAT, PSAT, GRE, even lactation consultant, if you want to be a certified lactation consultant, that it has to meet like a state or national standards, yes. You're required to sit for a licensing test. And oftentimes, in order to take those tests, if you need extra time, if you can't sit for 2 hours straight and you have a bladder issue that it requires you to go to the bathroom, you have to have special permission. I can't sit for 2 hours. I need a break. And you have to have a doctor or someone that's considered a professional to do that. So I went and got tested. I have ADHD. I have a disability in reading and writing. And I am sensory seeking, which is a whole nother thing. So I tend to be, and it's not the focus because I'm really focused and I can process stuff, but I tend to be on the hyper part. I have to move in order to focus. And I tend to be constantly doing something, clicking my pen, drumming my feet, rocking. That can be really annoying. It can be really annoying when you've got someone that has to tap their fingers in order to concentrate and think in a room of 300 people.
Yeah, for sure.
If your child is in college and they have a hearing issue, and it may be that they're great, but they have a hearing issue, it's not a problem in high school, but they're going to be going to college. Now they're in college and they're in a room with 300 people next to the football stadium. They might need to have that in a formal writing in 504 because they might need to have special seating or a special room or an FM system, or they may have to have sit on a certain side of the room in order to participate and hear. And especially with what we've learned the past 2 years with COVID, there are certain kids that can't do virtual learning. They can't. For sure.
Yeah,
and there's kids that can't wear masks. There are kids that some of the protocols that have been around, Section 504 testing for how that affects them because of their sensory needs, their medical needs, their social emotional needs, would allow them to participate and access the curriculum based on what they can do while accommodating their social, their mental, their medical, and their academic deficits that may otherwise impede their ability to attend and graduate or get the job.
Okay.
So it's
always worth
it's
doing.
great.
Yeah, I have a couple of very quick questions before we finish up. So how many children do you anticipate? Could you give us, just from your own personal experience? I know you've been advocating as an advocate now for 3 or 4 years in this area. So tell me how many of those kids that you meet typically would meet the criteria as well for the gifted and talented program? Do you find it's often synonymous that our children
all together? Just honestly, what I would say is Dr. Mike Postma has Gifted and Thriving. And then there's also several being Twice Exceptional, Google Twice Exceptional.
Right, that's
Twice exceptionality is its own little thing. And people that have IQs above 125 or have general abilities, that they have a difference between their verbal comprehension and their processing speed of more than 30 points. That's a whole nother talk, because you've got extremely intelligent people that seem to be able to do stuff, but they physically can't, or they should be able to do the things that we're demanding, and they're unable to. And that becomes a matter of, is it a will? Are they just not wanting to do it? Are they lazy? And I don't believe that that's true. I believe that Ross Greene is correct, and I have his approach on things, that children and people do well when they can, and when they can't is when there's a problem, and they don't know how to appropriately express what is wrong and what they need to succeed.
I really just asked that question because I want parents to know that even if their child is, super smart, which, a lot of our kids are very, very smart, but they do struggle in school. But that doesn't mean that they don't need accommodations or they don't need these individualized plans, because they can be gifted, but they also can have that twice exceptional situation going on. So it's always worthwhile, even though they seem to be able to, manage a lot of this stuff, especially when they're younger. It's as they get older that stuff can quite often come into play, and you're going, but they're so smart,
Yeah, especially when there's mental health or functional developmental issues. Yeah, so you can be a genius and have horrible, what we call executive functioning, the ability to plan, organize, and studies have shown that people with grit and great executive functioning ability, the plan, organize, time management, able to chunk things down, are more successful than people that are just smart.
Yeah,
smart. So what?
Yeah, I don't want people to think.
Anything.
Yeah, it's like, exactly. So we're not saying, if your child has a 504 or an IEP, or your adolescent, it doesn't mean they're not as smart as the next person. It actually is not even related to that. It's not an intelligence deficit. Always on these IEPs, you can have IEPs and 504s, even though you span the spectrum of intelligence. So I wanted to make sure that people understood that. Yeah. The other thing I also want to just very quickly touch on before we finish up is that so when we get our child onto a program, sometimes when they get to the high school, and I know this is going to run into another webinar that we're going to have to do, but when they get to 9th grade, they often decide at that meeting that child isn't going to enter the diploma program. So is there ever a time that a parent can say, I want my child to have a high school diploma. I do not want them on a non-diploma track. Everything that we do should be focused on getting that child to a high school diploma. Do you find that those children, that there is an opportunity for parents to request that for their children who have been put on a non-diploma track?
Yes. So okay. Yeah, no, the parent we should always be focused on the diploma track. And I would say that that's another issue as well. I think that we have, our education system is based on a system that was developed in the 1800s, and we have to understand that. And with the more we learn about the human mind and the way things are done, and we move into a different century where we don't even know what the future holds at this point because we're moving so fast. I think it would be great to always focus on a diploma. I can tell you that there's alternatives to public school as well. And there's things that can be done differently. And there's always things that can be done to be based on what your child needs. Yeah. All the teachers, and realistically, we can talk about, have another thing. And I want to say that some of the questions that parents may have at Fort Mill Special Needs United, we're going to be having attorneys, Keith Howard, of the Keith Howard Law Firm. I've asked John Cuddy of the Cuddy Law Firm to come and talk about some of the issues and things that I just don't feel like we can cover here.
Yes.
Regarding specifics of the law, because education is the key to effective advocacy for the parents. And then they can go to, BeckyBarnes.com I've got some information there at times. But if you are in Lancaster, Chester, Fort Mill, and within 15 minutes of Fort Mill, join the Fort Mill Special Needs United. There's parents there, they share information. It's a support group. NAMI, I would say, go to the NAMI classes and the parent support groups. That's going to be, we're a community and we succeed together. And the teachers that are special ed teachers, they're there because they had children or family members like ours too. And together, some of the things that we don't like, that the teachers don't like, those are laws that have been passed that no one can just change. We have to change the laws. And I really think that the best way to move forward as a parent is to build your tribe and your community and then figure out what works. And when the schools say, we want to do this, but we're not allowed, you contact your legislators, right, and say, why are you hampering our teachers and our staff? Why do you not consider, and that goes back to the question you just asked, Katie, the educators that I work with and I've talked to, no one thinks that it's fair that a child, because they can't pass Algebra 1, that can pass everything. No one thinks that a child that can be a productive member of society should be denied a high school diploma. But the legislator in the state of South Carolina is the one that passed that law. The Department of Education enforces the law, and the teachers and the staff have to follow the law if they want state and federal funding. So getting together as family members, as parent team and educator teams to say, we want XYZ law so all our children can get a diploma is going to be the most effective way to address that. And I can guarantee you that every special educator I worked with and everyone that I sit in a team meeting with, a sped director, they want some of the same changes and have some of the same concerns as you do as a parent. And that they just need you to speak out because they're in a position where they can't.
Right.
And if you're getting, you can't.
Yeah.
No one wants your child to be on a non-diploma track. But we have to speak out and make those changes and work with our educators that have the same concerns. And if we do that, we can make changes to the system. We can make changes to the way things are done. And we can make changes to even the law where in 1976, when it was first passed, it was supposed to be implemented and funded at 40%. And never in the United States has the special education federal mandate been funded at the 40% that it should have from the federal government.
Interesting.
And that's something as we as parents can work with everyone to do and change. Because I'm pretty sure if we got 40% to our schools for special education, we wouldn't have problems.
Things would definitely change. So they can get hold of you at BeckyBarnes.com. You have that meeting coming up with the legal people on the Fort Mill Special Needs United Parents Group. Do you know when that's going to have? When are you going to do that?
We're going to start trying to do that in the next week or two.
Okay, so everybody should join into that. I can link that Facebook group. I'm a member of that Facebook group.
And almost every district and every school, even charter schools and districts, also have special education and services where they educate parents on what's available to them. And I'd say to reach out to your district because you probably have like trainings that are going on in your district that they're doing around that. And the libraries in York and Lancaster, there's lots of trainings. Family Connections does trainings, ABLE does trainings. It's out there. People want to help you get what you need. It's just that we all have our own roles. And if everyone plays their part, then we make a successful society, and a child who may have a disability, but that can be a functional adult that is able to move out and
Get a
get a
job.
job and hopefully take care of me when I'm really old.
All right. Yeah. So they can take care of me. But all right. Well, thank you so much. That's really great. I'm sorry you have an internet connection problems, but we will make sure this goes out. And thank you so much for coming and talking to us again. We'll make sure that we let everybody know on our social media when that meeting's going to be.
Awesome.
We want people to know about that. And then I would really like to get together again with you and go over some more of these things that I know are burning questions in my mind and that people have already asked me. So thanks, Becky.
Yep.
I appreciate it so much. You have a great day.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.